My name is Melissa Jeter, Librarian Specialist for the Art Tatum African American Resource Center, located in the Kent branch of the Toledo-Lucas County Public Library. Welcome to the Art Tatum African American Resource Center's Oral History Project, the Edrene Cole Collection. Dr. Edrene Cole was a local African American historian and educator who began collecting the stories of noteworthy Toledoans in the African American community. With this oral history project, the Art Tatum African American Resource Center honors her memory and her work. Join me and University of Toledo Professor of Anthropology, Dr. Willie McCathar, as Toledo's very own African Americans share the stories of their lives.
Hi, I'm Dr. Willie McCathar. In this segment, we're pleased to welcome Maude Rixey. Mrs. Rixey, thank you ever so much for joining us. Ms. Rixey, I know that you were born and raised in Toledo.
Right.
What kind of work did your parents do?
They were factory workers, and my mother was a homemaker.
Okay. Do you know the conditions under which your parents came to Toledo?
They thought they were seeking more work and better opportunities when they left Illinois to come to Toledo.
Okay. So they came here and they eventually found work.
Right.
Okay. What schools did you attend as you were growing up in Toledo?
Gunkel School, Libby High School, and TU.
And TU. Okay. Let's go back. What are some of your first memories of some of your first addresses as you grew up here in Toledo?
Oh, I grew up in the apartments. They call it apartments, but it was really a government project. But for some reason, they called it apartments. Okay. I lived there till I was 18 years old.
Okay. And what were they called?
Brand Whitlock homes.
Brand Whitlock homes. Mm-hmm. So were these homes that were accessible to anybody or just special families?
At first they would interview people to see which one would be qualified to go into these projects. And if you had to be on the low income. But the projects, they called apartments, they attracted more upper scale people in Toledo.
Okay. So at some point then, was there a reputation for people who lived in those particular apartments?
Yes, it was.
Like what?
For one reason, if you had some special talents or you were could do special things, like we had the first black councilman came from the Brand Whitlock.
Okay.
It was J.B. Simmons Jr.
Okay.
And we had labor leaders that came from the Brand Whitlock, like Emmett Wheaton.
Okay.
And, I can name you several people that was outstanding. At that time, they had people that had their own businesses.
Okay.
We had people that had their own cab companies. We had a little small nursery school in the Brand Whitlock. We had people that was athletes. Just so many things that happened out of this area where these people were living there. They had to. They had self-esteem to be more than the average person when they were living there. And you wouldn't think that because you were thinking, well, this is a project. Why are they thinking that way? But they didn't even call it a project. They called it the Brand Whitlock. They had in the summertime, in the May they had maypole. They had so many things that was interest. They had their own laundry room. They had everything that made them do more things than the average black people would do, because they died to get into the Brand Whitlock, because at that time nobody lived in Toledo past the 600 block of anything. I can name Nebraska, Division, Collinwood, Vance. They just didn't live any further than the 600 block, because blacks at that time couldn't find housing when they needed it.
Okay. Was it that they couldn't find housing, or was it
it was not available for them?
Okay. So then you're saying then during this particular time period, African Americans, is it that they were confined, or did they have a choice of living beyond the blacks?
I think it was more of a race. The reason why they had a choice, didn't have a choice, because blacks could not live everywhere in Toledo at that time. And they originally, most of them started from the east side. And then they moved into Nebraska, Division, Humboldt, Hamilton, Tecumseh, but they never went beyond the 600 or 700 block.
Okay, okay, good, good. We'll come back in and address that in just a little bit. Let's talk a little bit about your relationship with the Harrises, who, as I understand it, were among the first African-American teachers in Toledo.
They were.
Okay,
They were cousins to my mother.
okay,
And my grandfather wrote my mother and told her that she had some relatives in Toledo. And so she had no idea who they were, but he told me they were school teachers, and that he was going to write them and give them our address. So they did. He did. So he wrote, and he wrote my mother and told them that they would be getting in contact with them. So they did. They got in contact with us.
okay.
So then we found out they went to Gunkel School. They were teaching at Gunkel School. So I hadn't started school when my mother met them. And then when I went to Gunkel School, they kind of watched out for me. When I got in trouble, they took it over. They would have me come down to their room, and I'd get them paddling down there. Then when I got home, I got another paddling. So during that time, that was the way they operated. They would say, "Oh no, you're not getting away with that." And then at lunchtime, they would go over to my mother's house and tell them what was going on and what kind of trouble I got into that day.
Okay. Now, what were your cousins' names?
Leela was the oldest, and Hannah.
Okay.
And then they had two sisters, Alma and Fanny. But Alma lived in Detroit, and Fanny never did any work. I don't know why she never did. She stayed home all the time. And Leela was the type of person that ran the whole family. Whatever went on with anybody in the family, she took care of it.
Okay. I think we all have one of those.
Well, she took care of everything that happened. And so Hannah was a little on the wild side. She was a teacher, but she's a little bit on the wild side. But she kept her under wraps. If she got too far out of the way, she would, tame her down.
Okay. Now, what grades did they teach at?
Leela taught the 6th grade, and Hannah taught the 3rd grade.
Okay. Now, am I correct, though, then that Gunkel was a predominantly African-American school?
At that time, they had some German people that went to that school. They had a few whites that still went to Gunkel School at that time.
Okay.
But it was predominantly black. But they did have some whites that went there. Across the street, I can remember across the street from Gunkel School, they had a shoe shop. And that shoe shop had some young German kids that went to that Gunkel School. So we would have our shoes fixed at this shoe shop. And in fact, the German girl used to come home with me.
Okay, okay.
And spend the night with me.
Well, okay.
But during that time, her father liked my mother, so it was okay for her to do that. But they don't. Blacks and whites never did mix like that before.
Okay, so that was kind of a unique relationship.
That was unique, yeah. And I was trying to think of her name. I can't even think of her name. It's my memory leaves me. But she did come home with me and spend the nights with me.
Okay. But then it sounds as if then your parents were open-minded enough to allow someone to come into their home.
My mother was.
Okay.
And my mother was a seamstress, and she never did any work. She just sat at her sewing machine and sewed all the time.
Okay.
And so therefore we met a lot of people. They would come over, my mother would hem their dresses or whatever repairs they had to do, or made dresses.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. Now, what kind of work did your father do?
He was just a factory worker.
Factory worker? Mm-hmm. Okay. Okay. But he provided a good living for his family?
At that time, yes.
Okay, good. So as you're growing up in Toledo, what kind of things did you do socially?
Well, we had the Belmont Enterprise. It was on Nebraska. They had that, and that was a skating ring, and we would go over and skate and have little parties, and it was real nice. That was just about. We had the Douglas Center. We had those things that the blacks went to, so we were very active in that.
Okay, okay, okay. We talked about this just a little bit, but growing up here, how would you characterize race relations as you grew up in Toledo?
It was poor. As I can recall an incident when I was going to Libby High School. We had a teacher, and she didn't want blacks to sit in the back because she said they would rub grease on the wall. And so she would always set us up near the front so we wouldn't rub against the wall.
Somebody actually told you that?
She actually said that.
Wow. Okay, it happens. How about going to the movie theater?
Oh, we had the Dixie Theater. That was down on Dorr Street, where right now it's Jerusalem Baptist Church, but it was the Dixie Theater at that time. We could go to the Dixie Theater, and just about all the kids went to the Dixie Theater on the weekends.
Okay.
And they had the World Theater, that was a little further down. And then when urban renewal came in and all that stuff was torn down, the Dixie Theater was no longer in existence.
Okay, okay. But now, were these black-owned theaters?
Black run.
Okay.
I don't think it was black on. I think black just ran the theater. And then we'd go downtown to the Paramount, Lois Valentine, the Pantheon Theater, and I can't think of all of them now.
Okay. Well, I guess when I ask you, even when you went to the non-black owned or run theaters, did African Americans have to sit in a particular place?
At first, when they started off, they wanted you to sit in the balcony. Then later on, they broke that discrimination about it. It was a minister that lived on the east side that broke that up. I can't recall his name right now, but he was the one that broke it up.
Okay, but someone had to fight for the right.
Yeah, they had to fight for the rights.
Okay, okay. Were there any restaurants that African Americans couldn't go to?
Yes, we had Stanley's. The kids would go out there and buy hamburgers and stuff on Fridays and Saturdays after the ball games and different things. And then we had several restaurants.
Okay, okay. Well, let me switch gears to talk about church as you were growing up.
Okay.
Was church an important part of your life as you grew up in Toledo?
Right. When I lived in the Brand Whitlock, we went to the church across the street, which was St. Paul AME Zion Church.
Okay.
In fact, there was two churches on that street. The one church was a Baptist church, another was a Methodist church. By my parents being Methodist, we always went to Methodist churches.
Okay, okay. So then, was going to church an option for you, or did you have to go to church?
It was something that you had to do. When you got up in the morning, you knew you were going to church on Sunday, and you were going to be there all day if they asked you to be there all day.
Okay, so that was an important part of your upbringing.
That was an important part of your life.
Okay. Let me ask you this, and this is just your opinion. You don't have to even call names on this next question. But some people have suggested that may have been some so-called blue vein churches in Toledo. Do you have any memory of that?
It was some Grace, not All Saints Episcopal. It was one of them.
Okay.
At that time, it was all very light-skinned people that went there.
Okay.
And then Third Baptist was one. They had all the upscale people that went to Third Baptist. When you said you went to Third Baptist, that was something well to think about. Warren Church was another one. And then they had the few Baptist churches like Mount Pilgrim and Calvary Baptist, but at that time Calvary Baptist was one that most of the blacks went to at that time.
Okay. So then is it fair to say that then that African Americans in Toledo were somewhat stratified among themselves?
I think they had more pride in themselves than they're doing now. You know, in that time, everybody kind of looked out for everybody, and then if they see your kids doing something that wasn't supposed to be doing, they took care of it right there, and then they would call your parents and tell you what you were doing. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So then there was this sense of community.
It was community and pride.
And pride. Okay, okay, good, good. Okay, so then what did you end up doing after you finished high school?
Oh, after I finished high school, I went to TU for 2 years. And then I later got married. My husband came from Lynchburg, Virginia.
Okay.
And we've been married 51 years.
Okay. And how did you all meet?
Well, I had a cousin that was in the service. And my husband was in the service with my cousin, not knowing that we were going to ever meet up together. But my cousin, he was always finding somebody for me. And so it's kind of funny. So he said, I got the man I want you to marry. I said, oh, no, I don't think so. He said, yeah, I think I got the man I want you to marry. So when my cousin got out of the service, William was in Lynchburg, Virginia, and he called him. They were calling each other all the time. Mm-hmm. So he said, why don't you come up to Detroit? Says, there's plenty jobs up here. He says, my cousin said, he says, come on up, stay with me. You can get a job in Detroit. So my husband, like a dummy, he said, well, I'm going to go up to Detroit and see if I can get a job. So when he gets up to Detroit, there wasn't no jobs.
Mm.
During that time, jobs was not plentiful. So he said, well, I'm not going to be here very long because I'm going to the Merchant Marines. He says, the Merchant Marines, he said, I always wanted to be in the Merchant Marines. He said, that's where I'm going. And then during this time, my cousin said, why don't you come over to Detroit? I have somebody I want you to meet. So I goes over to Detroit and I met my husband. And we got married about 7 months later. And we've been married ever since.
51 years later.
51 years.
Wow. Any children or grandchildren?
I have 2 children.
Okay.
I have a boy and I have a girl. And I have 4 granddaughters.
Okay. Okay. That you absolutely adore?
I do.
Okay, good, good. Okay, let me ask you, so as you and your husband are living in Toledo, who are some of the people that you socialized with?
Well, I'm a member of Brayton Church, and I associate with the members there. Edrene Cole and his wife were my special friends, but she died, and so I have quite a few friends. I had one friend, I have been friends with her over 50-some years, Alice Brown.
Okay.
And Mary Armstrong, all these people I've been friends with ever since school days.
Really?
And Alina Moss, several people that I've been knowing for a long time. In fact, I know quite a few people.
Tell you what, let's go back to Edrene Cole. I mean, I know that
Okay.
Edrene was an educator and
Yes,
spent a
she
good
was.
deal of her life documenting Black history of Toledo. What are some of your memories of Edrene?
Well, we went on vacation together. And we went on several cruises together in different places, New York, Chicago, just different things we used to do together, and which I really miss her because we got along real well. We were in two different paths. She was an educator and I was a homemaker.
Okay.
But we seemed to hit it off real well, and we got along real well.
Okay. People seem to always speak very highly of Edrene. What was so special about Edrene Cole?
Well, she had a way of making people come together. And by that, I'm saying we could be at a function and she would know this person didn't even like that person, but she would set us at the same table. And then sometime I'd say to her, why did you set me with her? You know I don't care for her. She said, well, you got to learn how to like her. You got to learn how to love people. I said, okay. I said, well, I'll go along with that. That was her famous thing. You got to learn how to love people. You can't think that way, she said. So she was just, and then when my first granddaughter got married, she did the whole wedding. And she was ill at the time. And I didn't realize how ill she was because she never let that illness hold her down. She would just push constantly to do something differently. And she went through the whole wedding with my granddaughter. It took about 6 months to get it together, but she got it together, and it turned out to be a big success.
Really? Mm-hmm. Okay.
But she just had a lot of drive in her, and a lot of she just wouldn't let anything stop her. She knew that she had cancer, but she didn't know when she was going. But she said she would just keep pushing, and I kept hoping that she would get better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, she certainly left quite a legacy.
Yes, she is.
Here in Toledo, and made a huge impression on a number of both young and old people here in Toledo. So good, good. Please.
I can remember at Christmas time, she would take the older women at the church, and she would give them all some kind of little gift. She'd make sure she got a little gift for them, and she would take them. It wouldn't be a big gift, but just something to let them know that she's thinking about them.
Did she really? Wow. Yeah, it's a very, very special lady. I wish I had the opportunity to have met her.
Mm-hmm.
Let me go back and talk about some of the earlier years in Toledo. Thinking back when you and your husband purchased your first home or others, how easy was it or difficult was it for African Americans to get a home financed?
Well, we really didn't have any problem purchasing a home. We went to Toledo Trust, made our application like on a Thursday, and by Monday, we knew we had the house.
Okay.
So we had the necessary down payment because we had saved, to get it. So we really didn't have a major problem getting our first home.
Okay. So you were able to get it financed, but just only in a particular area, or by that time were African Americans able to move beyond?
Then when we got our first home and we went to Toledo Trust, someone said to us, "I can't believe you got a house through Toledo Trust." I said, "Because they don't normally give loans to black people." And I said, "Well, I don't know what happened, but we got our first house just like that." So we were very fortunate at that time.
Okay. Okay. Good. Good. Now, was that located near Dorr Street?
My first house was off of Dorr Street. It was called Brookley.
Okay.
912 Brookley was my first house.
Okay. Okay. Now speaking of Dorr Street, I've heard different accounts of how great Dorr was in its heyday. What's your memory of Dorr Street?
Oh, Dorr Street was the street. I can remember when they had the M&L nightclub and several other nightclubs coming down Dorr Street. I guess that must have been about the 600 or 700 block. And then they had houses all on each side of the street. And they had a lot of stuff going on that wasn't really outstanding. They had prostitution going on that street, on Dorr Street, in that area. Because my mother would say when we were coming up, "You can't walk in that area. You just can't. You can't go over there. I don't want you on that street down there." But you know how you would do when you were young. You would go and peek and see what was going on. So we would go and peek in the clubs and see what was going on, but we never went inside.
Sure.
So although now the kids will go inside, but now you couldn't do that. And then you had the Dixie Theater, then you had the World Theater, and you had a Five and Dime store on the corner.
Okay.
You had Ray's Supermarket, and then they had let me see. They had on one side they had the Benson's garage was on the opposite side, which was Edrene's father.
Oh, really? Mm-hmm. Okay.
He had a garage up over where they lived up over top of the garage.
Okay, the Benson family did.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so they had that garage there, and they just had all kinds of businesses all down Dorr Street. But when the urban renewal came through, they got rid of all of that stuff. They tore all that stuff down on both sides. But nothing has happened drastic since then.
Okay.
It's just blank spaces, run down houses and stuff in between there. And they've been trying to improve Dorr Street, but I don't know when it's going to happen.
So do you think that the urban renewal then was a good or bad idea, in your opinion?
In a way, I think it was bad because I think it took the pride away from people. Just like when blacks were more responsible for the things they did.
Okay.
And now they don't seem to be responsible like they were at that particular time.
Do you think it was a sense of ownership? You think they owned something?
They
maybe?
did own more things. So they owned the homes on that street, down Dorr Street, 300 and 400 block and all the way down. Then later they moved in like the 1000 block, 1400, going down to the 1400 block. It was just really more ownership during that particular time. And then they came and bought those houses up, and people had to go other places to move. Okay. And that, like I said, they might have lived in a house for $9,000 or $10,000, and then they had to go buy a house for $20,000. That put them, raised up their economy a lot to make them move in different areas.
Okay. You say they, what do you mean they?
I mean the people on Dorr Street.
Okay.
I should reframe that, the people on Dorr Street.
Okay. Good. Okay, so let me go back and talk about your work career.
Okay.
What kind of work jobs have you held here in Toledo?
I worked I started in the post office working on a workroom floor.
Okay.
And then later I got a job in personnel. And then later I moved from personnel to the finance department, which I stayed there 18 years, but I never could advance up higher because somebody would always outbid me. And then after I left the post office, I just stayed home.
Okay. But you were at the post office total
36 years.
36 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Do you feel that in terms of employment, did you ever sense any racism or sexism working in the post office?
Yes, they had racism there.
Okay.
And they had, I guess you could say they had certain people they would push up and certain people they wouldn't.
Okay. Well, I guess that's one of the unfortunate things of work life that it
Right.
happens, but you were able to stay there
But I was able to stay there for 36
for
years.
36 years. Okay, that's awesome. Good.
And it gave me a good living.
Okay. Okay, good. Okay, then, Mrs. Rixey, I guess as we begin to wrap up here, is there anything else that we have not talked about that we should visit or mention?
Well, I guess you could say Toledo's not really a bad place to live, if you want to think about it, because the job opportunities are getting better,
Okay.
and people are living a lot better.
Okay.
And it's really, I would say it was more of a family town.
Okay. So would you say that things have gotten better since you were a child living in Toledo?
Definitely, it has gotten better.
Last question. I know that we now have our first African American president.
Right, and it's wonderful.
I was going to ask you, any thoughts on that?
I think it's wonderful. I think we have a president that's very intelligent. His wife is very intelligent. They can't find anything really wrong with him because he's up on everything. And I think we're going to move forward with him.
Okay. Do you think that now, because we have an African American president, that racism is a thing of the past?
No, I think it's not over with. I think it's going to take at least 20 or 30 years before it's over with. It's not going to be over with today or tomorrow. It's going to take time. But I think now we got somebody that can move us forward.
Okay. Okay, good. Mrs. Rixey, well, I want to thank you for taking time out of your day to come visit with us. Much appreciated. And we'll let that be the last word.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.